Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. Today we'll be discussing already the 10th round of the UCI Cyclocross World Cup, and it's a new one on the calendar, the cross in Rucphen. As said, it's new. It used to host a C2 race, but this year they could make the step towards the World Cup because they wanted to fill their amount of slots that they wanted, so they were lucky to be a late addition to the calendar. And I'm going to discuss this race with Twan and Issam.
Hello.
Hey everybody.
Mathieu van der Poel was supposed to make his start to the cyclocross season this weekend here in Rucphen, but unfortunately he had a knee injury somewhere in his training and he decided to skip this weekend, so no Rucphen and Namur for him. Van Aert was on a training camp in Spain with Jumbo-Visma, but Pidcock, however, was here, and Issam will tell us how he and the others did in the men's race.
Yes, indeed, like you said, from the big three, only Tom Pidcock that was available to race today, and that was able to race today. At the start, we had Lars van der Haar, that was very strong. A small crash in the beginning of the race. Involved were Ruwek, Meuse, and Pim Ronhaar. These guys will eventually not be able to have a very good race. Also, Orts was involved. Was not really able to finish in the end in the top 10. Maybe costed him a top 10. But at the front, we had a couple of guys that, you know, the main guys, Iserbyt, Zweek, Vanthournhout, Aerts, Hermans, they were all there. One guy that was not really there at the start, that was Pidcock, not really having the greatest of starts, had to chase. In the fourth lap, he was able to get around in the front and even put the others under pressure. But from the beginning, it was very clear that it was going to be a race that was going to be close and a race that was going to be fast. In the later stages of the race, Iserbyt and Michael Vanthournhout put Pidcock under pressure, and those were basically the three main guys that will battle it out for victory. Obviously, Iserbyt and Michael Vanthournhout teammates helped each other a little bit. I have to say that Iserbyt was the one that was taking the lead. Vanthournhout was very good in following. And in the last lap, Pidcock was finally getting a little bit back because he had a gap in the beginning. Came back, overtook Vanthournhout, and then it was like the under 23 days, a battle, mano a mano, Iserbyt and Pidcock, heading towards the barriers, you know, that were in the last section of the race. After the barriers, there's only a sprint to the finish line. Iserbyt takes it a bit slower than Pidcock. Pidcock goes around the outside and is eventually able to take the win in the World Cup in Rucphen, and that's his first World Cup of his career.
And in addition to that, it's the first non-Dutch or Belgian World Cup win in the men's category since Francis Moret won the World Cup in Namur 2013, over 2,000, almost 3,000 days ago. So that's certainly been a while, 8 years. So yeah, it's very good to see Pidcock on the top step of the podium, in my opinion. Would you guys say that Iserbyt gave away the victory or gave it out of his hands, that he should have been able to win this race going into the last lap?
For me, it's tough to say if he gave it away. I think he did everything he could in the last lap to make sure that he was going to win. I think that, you know, until that point, he did everything right. Pidcock was just a little bit faster, but he just was making a couple of like small minor mistakes, and that kind of put him a little bit behind. I think that Iserbyt was in a very good position to win the race. That maybe Vanthournhout could have played a bigger role, but Vanthournhout was passed. Unfortunately, we couldn't see it on the TV coverage, but was passed very quickly by Pidcock. And you know, the barriers were taken very slowly. It was almost like Iserbyt was preparing for a sprint, or was just not really able to have, you know, to put in a sprint or anything. But I think in the end we look at the more deserved winner, because it's very tough to be chasing for half the race, then to take over, take initiative, be sure to be in the front and then win the race. I think you can only say that the deserved winner won today.
I do think for Iserbyt it's quite hard to hold on to an advantage that isn't that big in a parkour like this, where Pidcock has the ability just to full send it around every single corner, and if it goes wrong in one of them, oh well, it's done and you finish in second place. But until it goes wrong, like, it's so easy to just like keep pedaling 1 meter longer and just take like a slightly wider line to set yourself up better, which I think he did brilliantly into the barriers and just absolutely annihilated Iserbyt before they even got to sprinting. But as you said, I think off camera as well, like he was going to win that sprint even if he was only alongside or just behind.
Yeah, I do think that Iserbyt could have done more on the barriers. You saw Pidcock take a very wide line there, where Iserbyt attempted to take a shorter line in the corner, but that didn't pay out. But eventually, the speed Pidcock was carrying there, just everything came together for him in that last lap. And about the corners, Pidcock said he didn't feel too confident in the corners, and that is also how the gap of Iserbyt and Vanthournhout was created, just Pidcock being a tad slower through a couple of corners. But then eventually he said in the last lap I had nothing to lose, and he could take these extra risks because the parcours here just wasn't the most challenging. I mean, yes, it's a nice parcours, but it's parcours that you have quite a lot of in the season. It's mostly flat. Yes, there's some minor elevation, but nothing too serious. A couple of corners. It's very hard to make a difference here. Eventually, it's just about being the strongest, and you could see that Pidcock really was the strongest, because on these straights, and especially the start-finish straight, he was so much faster than Iserbyt and Vanthournhout. He closed seconds there, lap after lap. So I think overall very deserved victory for Pidcock. I would, however, like to come back a bit towards the Michael Vanthournhout thing. We were thinking that he could potentially play a role to hold up Pidcock and secure the victory for Elie Iserbyt. Did Vanthournhout mess that up, or was simply Pidcock just too fast?
In my opinion, he could have maybe done something. I have a feeling that he was maybe in the belief that he could maybe battle Iserbyt for victory. Obviously, you can get that idea quite quickly on a parcours like this, because the differences are not that big, and following is, I wouldn't say easy, but it's easier than on other parcours. So you will get the realization that it's not going to be your day a little bit later. But I definitely think that Vanthournhout could have played a bigger role. I think, you know, he didn't even have one chance to do anything. So, and it's definitely a race where seconds count. Obviously, Pidcock was the strongest today, and I'm happy that it turned out this way and not into a team tactic win for Iserbyt. But he's his teammate, so he has the right to do so. And I think that it wasn't really played out well, and I would think that they will talk about it after, with the guys under each other.
Unfortunately, the overtake wasn't on camera, so we can only assume like what happened there. But it did feel like Pidcock came from quite far back to be all the way in front of Vanthournhout by the time that he got back on camera. It was quite surprising to me as well. Yeah, I don't know what happened exactly, but Pidcock clearly fully sending it, and really nice that team tactics didn't become a part in a parkour where it very much could have been and maybe should have been.
Yeah, but the move was made before the corner already, because you could see them coming to the corner and then Pidcock was already ahead. So I just assumed that Michael Vanthournhout just cracked in the wheel of Iserbyt and fell back, and then got overtaken by Pidcock. And if you get overtaken on a straight, well, there's nothing you can do. Like, sure, if Vanthournhout would have still been in the wheel of Iserbyt in the sandpit, Vanthournhout could have dismounted like at the beginning, and no way Pidcock could go around there, and then Iserbyt had the win. But that wasn't the case. I think Vanthournhout did a very good job in following Iserbyt for that long, and he was pretty impressive. At some point I even thought, maybe Vanthournhout can have a shot at the victory here. Well, of course, in the end Iserbyt was that tiny bit stronger, but personally I don't think we can blame Michael Vanthournhout for anything. I think he put in a very solid ride, and he was already good last week in Val di Sole with that second place, and now he ends at third here in Rucphen. I personally think that Vanthournhout's form is improving, and that this is about the right moment to do that, because we're coming to the Christmas period. Everything is still to play for there. Also in the classification of the World Cup, he still has a chance of ending second. So in my opinion, Vanthournhout did a good job today. Let's look at our entire top 10. That win of Pidcock, of course, ahead of Iserbyt and Vanthournhout. 4th place for Quinten Hermans ahead of Lars van der Haar, Toon Aerts, Laurens Week. 8th place for Corné van Kessel ahead of Vincent Baestaans and Toon van der Bos rounds out the top 10. I'd like to come back here to the performance of Quinten Hermans. We have seen Quinten Hermans in the top 5 a lot this season. This is another one. Only in Boom he has ended outside of the top 5. Definitely a very consistent season. I feel like the form of Quinten Hermans is slightly improving now. They have been on a training camp. They only left that training camp to do the race in Val di Sole. And I think it's paying off, because both Hermans and Van Kessel looked pretty good. But on the other hand, the parcours was not that difficult. So things were together for a long time. And if you really want to play any importance in the remainder of the season, you had to be in that big group, in my opinion. How do you guys think about that?
Yeah, it's really important to be in that first front group because it's quite hard to make the differences on this parcours. So if you just have like a group in front that's stronger than the group behind, the gap is going to get expanded. But if you would have been like most of those guys in that second group still would have been able to hang on to the guys in that first group. So it's always a bit unfortunate if you miss out on that.
Yeah, about that parcours, what did you guys think about it?
No, I quite liked it, to be honest. I mean, there were some things that were a bit, I would say, off. I think especially that when they have that long section and then they have to go on the stairs where Iserbyt crashed. I think that part is a bit, I don't know, a bit unnecessary, or at least they could change that a little bit. A bit too long, in my opinion. Overall, I think also with the carousel, how they call that, quite fun. I don't think that the riders like it a lot, but especially if there would be some tendency there, it would have been very nice to watch that, and for the viewers, obviously very good. But I think overall, it's it's a flat parkour with a couple of good hills in it, good technical sections as well, good part of sand. I think it could be a little bit longer, but overall was okay. So I think overall it's an okay parkour, and World Cup worthy. Yeah, maybe there are some races that look like this, but overall it was okay.
I think it's a shame that this is in the World Cup because it's just the most generic parkour you're gonna find on the calendar all year. And there's just no real places that I see where you can make good differences. It's really hard, and especially when like the best riders aren't like the most technical. Like in the men's, we see that Iserbyt is really able to push it in those corners, and then like differences do appear a little bit more. But it really feels like a cross where if you just manage to hang on long enough and you have a good enough sprint, you just win it.
I mean, I already gave my 2 cents on the parkour earlier, but I still think it is a generic parkour and it's something that you find a lot. But on the other hand, that you find it a lot also means that probably should get some representation in the World Cup, because the World Cup should represent all type of cyclocross venues. And yes, it's maybe not the most exciting one. The least exciting courses often provide us with the most exciting racing because it is that difficult to make a difference somewhere. We saw that again today. There was a big group of riders at the front, and whereas some people might think that is not super exciting, there's also plenty of people who do think it's exciting. We might enjoy watching the technique of Mathieu van der Poel leading the race by a minute, but others really like to see a big group at the front, and that's just personal preferences, and that's all fine. I'm a bit torn if it should be in the World Cup or not. I think it's good that they got their shot. They are aiming to take over the place of Hogerheide for next year, as Hogerheide is hosting the World Championships. I wouldn't be opposed against this being the week before the World Championships in Hogerheide. But then again, I do agree with Twan. There is just nothing that stands out on this parkour. I also agree with Issam that they took maximum advantage of the location they have, because it's just not a special location. But I'm a bit torn. It's not the most spectacular race, but on the other hand, it's also generic races also should be represented, because you see it everywhere. Like in Formula 1, there's also a couple of boring but normal racetracks in there. And for instance, there, for the people who do follow it, Austria or things like that, those are not special either, but they are there because it represents something. So I don't know how this... I don't think they can take much more out of this venue. But for now, I will give it the benefit of the doubt, I think. And it did suit some riders, but it also... So a couple of riders disappointed me a bit. Let's start with Laurens Sweeck. What did you guys think about that? This parcours should suit him, 7th place. What's your guys' opinion on his race and result?
Well, I think for Sweeck, it's obviously not really his best season. I mean, he's from the three of Pauwels the one that's struggling the most. I think Vanthournhout, like you said already a little bit earlier, is getting into form, is having those good races. Val di Sole was very good. Today was also a very good race from his side. But, Sweeck seems to be struggling a little bit, especially on today, which was a parcours for his liking. Obviously, he had some bad luck. He had to change a bike due to a brake failure, it seems, that what they were talking about, a hydraulic leak or something like that. So... that was obviously, you don't really want to chase on a fast parkour from bikes, but he had to do that. And Obviously, that's not really going to help, but in the end, I think we couldn't really see that he was great today. So, a bit of bad luck, but also not really the legs to be in the front.
I would agree on that take, and I think it's also important to note that Zweig has been on a training camp. He didn't race last week in Essen, and he didn't race in Val di Sole. Some riders struggled to get in the rhythm, and I think that was also kind of the case for Lars van der Haar and Toon Aerts. They ended 5th and 6th, which is a solid placing, but for the Baloise Trek team, it's obviously a disappointment to be on the podium with 0 riders, so... yeah, I think it's maybe just a bit of lacking rhythm for these riders. Twan, what do you think about the duo of Baloise Trek? Is it a lack of rhythm or is it something else?
I think it's especially disappointing for Van der Haar, because this is the sort of parcours, especially at the start of the season, or like the middle part around the European Championships, that you would say, oh, here we can really see him shine, and it just, yeah, missing something today, and I think Toon Aerts eventually just backing off as well, with Namur in mind, but yeah, maybe missing a little bit of racing rhythm, quite important, of course, especially in a course like this, where it's... full on the whole time.
Yeah, and for Aerts, I would like to say that the team manager of Baloise Trek Lions, Sven Nys, said that Aerts was waiting the first half of the race and racing with Namur in the back of his head. So we obviously don't know what happened there. But for the first part, I thought, okay, Aerts is taking a different approach. Maybe it will pay off. Perhaps he just felt, okay, I don't have the legs today to compete for the win. I'll just go for a solid placement, and tomorrow I'll give it my everything in Namur, which isn't necessarily a bad thought, because tomorrow should really suit Aerts. I think if we see a very good Toon Aerts, he can end on the podium tomorrow. What do you guys think? Aerts for the podium, or should we maybe look at Quinten Hermans, who we haven't mentioned, but put in a solid race?
I think both. I think you can look at both. I think you can say that Aerts, obviously, like you said, Nys already pointed that out, that he was riding with Namur at the back of his head. Obviously, a race where I think he has a bigger chance of winning than today. So he will obviously, he wants to perform very well on the parcours, and I think Hermans naturally is going to be very good on that parcours because he has that climbing ability. If it's a tough race, you have to call Hermans, because he's gonna be very good on that day, and you can always count on him for a top 5 finish. And I think for this race, definitely a podium or even a win. And I'm interested to see what Pidcock can do on this parcours, because I think that honestly, I thought that Namur would be more suited for Pidcock than today. He already won today, so who knows? Maybe 2 in a row for him. And get a double win weekend, but we have to see. I think that Aerts and Hermans, to answer the question, that are gonna be, very main favorites with Pidcock for tomorrow.
I do see Pidcock as the big favorite, but behind that, I would indeed look at Hermans, Iserbyt, also Vanthournhout and Aerts. And yeah, I think Hermans did a good job today. I mean, it's maybe a bit overlooked, but he was able to keep up with Pidcock for quite a while, but then eventually Pidcock just put down that many watts on the straight and dropped Hermans. So overall, I think Hermans can also leave here with a satisfied feeling. He also just got caught up behind the gap. So yeah, I think overall a good race here by Hermans. And yeah, we already said it, the Tormans guys, they skipped the... they went on a training camp. From the training camp, they went to Val di Sole, and then they went back on training. And it looks to pay off. Hermans had a bit of a difficult time. He didn't look great in Val di Sole, and in Boom especially, he looked pretty bad. But now he looks to be back where he was throughout the rest of the season, so pretty good job. To finalize the men's part, I would still like to mention a couple of names outside of the top 10. Twan, we had a crash at the beginning of the race in the first corner. We saw Dan Soete and Philippe Orts involved there. They eventually ride a comeback until places 13 and 14. Do you think that these riders could have ended in the top 10 without that crash?
Yeah, it's a really terrible time to crash. You have to ride through the whole pack again, and every group you miss, you have to carry everyone up. So I think if you're still able to ride back to like places 13, 14, maybe you could have challenged for a top 10 without that crash.
Yeah, definitely, I agree, and I think especially for Orts, he was further back than Soete after the crash, so to come back to 14th is good, but I think it's a shame. I would have loved to see that Spanish flag in the top 10. Orts also just extended his contract with Burgos Beache for next season, so that's also good news on his end. He also ends just ahead of Tim Merlier in 15th. Any comments on his race?
It was for Merlier his first, not his first race, but his first race back with the bigger guys, to say it like that. He already had a race, I think, in France and got the 3rd place there, which alone is already a very good result. Today, I thought that he, that was a bit this position where he would finish up. It's a fast parcours, definitely not the easiest first race to start off with the elites with the bigger guys. And I think that in the end, he can be satisfied with the results. I didn't really expect a little bit more, and I think that he will build on this, and maybe we'll see him a couple of times in the top 10, who knows.
Let's talk about the women's race then. There we also had a big group of riders at the front throughout most of the race. Twan, tell us about how that played out.
Yeah, we had the 6 main Dutch women, Vos, Brand, Betsema, Van Empel, Pietersen and Worst. They would decide the race. Alvarado having a very bad start, having to start behind Honsinger, certainly did not help, and the other 6 would fight it out. With a few laps to go, it would be Vos that would place an acceleration to thin out the group a little bit. It would be too much for Pietersen, Van Empel and Annemarie Worst, as Vos made sure that she didn't have to try as hard anymore to be in 2nd position by whoever was leading at the time. And Lucinda Brand would put the power down in the final lap, would put everyone under pressure as much as possible, but it wasn't quite enough, as at the barriers Vos was right there, and on the road she was able to outsprint Lucinda Brand, but she does claim 2nd place, as she did manage to drop Denise Betsema.
Second race after a break period for Marianne Vos, and almost the 2nd time she messes up a almost certain win in the last lap by making a mistake. Well, this time it was more of a bad luck not being able to clip in her pedals because there was some mud around her clip-ins, so that was unfortunate, but still taking the win there. I mean, is there anything you can do against this Marianne Vos? Because, I mean, it just looks like a better version of Lucinda Brand, who is already very hard to beat. It's just a Brand who is a bit more technical, perhaps has 15 watts less on the straight, but can compensate for that with her technical abilities, and has a more rapid sprint and acceleration than Brand. So it looks very hard to beat Vos, especially if you're on a parcours like this today in Rucphen.
I think on a parcours like this today, you have to have her have a mechanical, basically, because she is looking absolutely insane, and it's quite easy to make up like 5 meters on a straight, even on someone that is more powerful than you, because you just brake a little bit later at the end, have a little bit better of an exit, and you're there already. And yeah, Lucinda Brand very good, but on a course like today, it's extremely hard to beat Marianne Vos. Maybe tomorrow, for example, it's a better day because it's harder to be in 2nd place all day and control the race from there.
Yeah, but that's also why Vos is not riding tomorrow. I mean, towards the World Championships, Vos is still riding Dendermonde, which is basically a parcours like we had today. Hulst, which is also somewhat a parcours like we have today. Then she's racing the Dutch Nationals, which we are understanding will probably be held in Rucphen as well, or at least that's the current plan that the Dutch Cycling Union has after it's been cancelled in Zaltbommel. And then she's racing Hoger Heide and the Worlds, and both are also parcourses that suit her, because Vos would have won Fayetteville in the mud this year if it wasn't for a mechanical issue. So, well, or it was a crash actually, but still coming back to that, oh, she also had a mechanical there. That was it. That was the story of Fayetteville. So I think it's definitely hard to beat Vos here, and what I think is really interesting is the similarities we had with the men's race. Vos could have very well done the same as Pidcock on the barriers, but then running. And that was down to her, when she gets off her bike, she puts her leg through her other leg that's still clipped in and her bike. So this means she is already preparing the first step while she's still standing on the bike. And that way she keeps all her momentum. Whereas the others, they just put their leg over their bike and then they clip out, and then they get this shock because they unclip and they interrupt the forward momentum that they've created by riding. And Vos doesn't do this, and that's also why she was that much faster running on the barriers. And I thought that was really interesting to see, because later in the men's race, Pidcock did the same, but then by jumping faster, taking a wider line into the barriers. So that was really interesting to see, but overall, I would like to just take a moment to appreciate how special this is, what Marianne Vos is doing, because she's already a 7-time world champion. She's still good on the road, and that was the young generation, and the level in cyclocross has gone so much up in the last couple of years. We see it with riders like Sanne Kant, who used to be up there, and they've fallen back. We've seen it with riders like Sophie de Boer and Talita de Jong, who are now retired. And we've seen riders come and go, but Vos, somehow she always manages to stay at the front. She was fighting with Koep van Nagel and Daphne van der Brand, and now she's fighting against Brand, and she's fighting against Van Empel and Pietersen. It's just very special, and I think we should not underestimate that, because in my opinion, it's very, very special what we see here by Marianne Vos.
I went into the season thinking Vos is probably going to be for is some nice preparation for the road races, maybe take on some of the smaller crosses, get your wins there, because it wasn't too positive after last season, but after the races she has done this year, she is looking like a legit contender for the world title, and I wouldn't be very surprised if from here on out she won the remaining races until the World Championship, because she is choosing courses that very much do suit her, and we have already seen that in Fayetteville she is able to ride a strong tactical race, and I think if the conditions are maybe a bit easier, it will help her for sure. So yeah, Marianne Vos, just amazing what she is able to do.
Yeah, I definitely agree there, because as I said, it's very special what we've seen. Beating Brand, who did a very good race in my opinion, nothing more than I can say than that, because it was just a good race by Brand, but Vos was just that tiny bit better today, and I think we could see some nice interesting battles between these riders. Maybe not tomorrow in Namur, but in the rest of the season definitely. Behind that we see Denise Betsema in third. What do we make of her race? It's, in my opinion, a typical Betsema race. Good, but just not good enough in the last lap.
Yeah, I mean, she really tried, and I have to say that it was that she was close at times, and you know, Vos was making, I wouldn't say mistakes, but it were moments that she had some issues. But you know, at the end of the day, you know that if Vos is gonna make it till the last corner and she's in your wheel, you have a very tough job ahead of you with the sprint. And I think Brand knew, also in her interview, was a bit disappointed, I would say, and in my opinion a bit too disappointed, but I can understand with her winner mentality that she wanted to win the race, and she didn't really care if Vos was better in the sprint or anything. She just wanted to win. I can understand that, but there's not much you can do with this Vos. I mean, Brand is, like we have said earlier this season, very strong, the strongest at the moment, but there is just one woman at the moment that's just a little bit stronger, and is also very strong tactically in racing. And I think that that Brand is definitely going to think about this and be like, well, I hope that I'm not gonna have Vos in my wheel in the World Championships in the last corner, because if that's gonna happen, it's gonna be a very hard sprint.
No, that's definitely the case. I think we saw a great final lap here for the rest. Yes, it was together, and we saw some position switching. We saw Betsema coming back from a bad start. I think without that bad start, Betsema could have been a bit more to the front. Betsema also did quite some work, but I feel like for Betsema it was a bit of desperation. I mean, what can Betsema do? I mean, yes, she is technically the superior over Brand, but not over Vos. On the power, she is not superior over any of the two. She does actually have a pretty underrated sprint. People forget about that, but Betsema almost outsprinted Vos a couple of years ago at the European Championships. I don't think that she could beat this Vos in a sprint, but she could still be close. But it's just hard for Betsema to see what she can do. The only thing she can do is put down the pace and hope riders make mistakes or play a team game with Van Empel. It didn't really work out today. But for Betsema, I mean, today I don't really blame her for pacing the middle part of the race, because I honestly don't think there's anything else she could do. If she waits and goes into the last lap with Van Empel and Pietersen there as well, then she probably ends 5th instead of 3rd. So today I don't really blame Betsema for doing that much work in the middle part of the race. I think for Betsema, just this parcours just isn't hard enough for her. There's nothing where she can really make the difference.
Yeah, I would agree on that for like a part of it, because I think obviously she had a bad start, had to come back, was in the chase. That, that took her a lot of energy. I think only the way she, it was very abrupt in a way. She came to the front and immediately wanted to put the others under pressure, which in my opinion, I think she should have just waited like 2 laps or something. Just give herself a little bit of rest to make sure that, you're prepared for the last part of the race, because you had to come back from a chase. You had to work already that hard to come, to the front. So in a way, I definitely, I didn't mind that she was there pulling halfway through the race. But in another way, I was like, you could have just waited a little bit to make sure that you can rest just enough to make sure that you have enough in the tank. Because she said it herself in the interview that it cost her that chase that she did, and that it was very hard for her to recover from that. And in the last lap, she felt that she didn't have the power in the legs to in the end finish higher than third.
Let's look at our entire top 10 then. We had that win, of course, of Marianne Vos ahead of Lucinda Brandt and Denise Betsema. Solid race by the youngsters van Empel and Pieterse, and 4th and 5th. Then a 6th place for Annemarie Worst, who was struggling to keep up with the leaders for the entire race. She ends ahead of Sherin van Anrooy, who then beat Sannekant, Eva Lechner and Inge van der Heijden. I think we cannot say that much about the race of Van Empel and Pieterse, and the same goes for Worst. I mean, yes, they were there at the front, they did a solid job, but then again, this is a very fair parcours. You just end in the place where you belong today, and for Van Empel and Pieterse it was just next to the podium. But I have to say, I think next year we will see a great clash between the young generation, Van Empel, Pieterse, and also Van Anrooy, and they will really fight every week for the win with Vos, Brandt and Betsema. How do you guys see that? Do you think that they can make that last step next year to fully compete for the victory? Because now they're already pretty close.
I think, of course, if they just follow natural progression, they will make like a little bit of a step as well, which I think will be enough for Puk Pieterse to win in Tabor for sure. And I think like that will help her massively with confidence boost as well. I think Sherin van Anrooy is still maybe a little bit from her crash in Tabor. Like there's still some level that she hasn't quite made up from that, I think. So I think all 3 of them will make a step next season, and especially for Puk Pieterse, it's going to be big.
As said, I think today they put in a solid ride, and I mean, Van Anrooy, who maybe wasn't at the front, did a good comeback, was putting in decent lap times in the background, and she was doing that by herself, and that's a big difference. I think riding in a group does benefit you here a bit. She eventually overtook Eva Lechner, who ended 9th, but I do want to say that Eva Lechner put in a very solid ride here. This is not a parcours that I think suits her to end 9th. I think she's definitely on good form, and we can see a top 10 from her tomorrow in Namur again.
Yeah, I think Namur for her is gonna be a very good race. I think definitely suits her a little bit more than a race like this. So I think it's gonna be interesting to see what's gonna happen tomorrow, because in Namur, because I have a feeling that there were some women, and also with the men's category, some that were riding with in their back mind like, okay, tomorrow another race, tomorrow a race that suits me more, tomorrow a race that's a little bit harder, and then we have to see if that's gonna work out or not.
Yeah, and if we look at the rider who ends just behind Eva Lechner, Inge van der Heijden, she had a good start, faded a bit, perhaps a bit of decompression. The 777 team did a lot of hard training on their training camp in Spain. The women there trained together with the men of Alpecin Phoenix, also of the Eco Crelan team. So perhaps the tiredness built up there meant that it was not an ideal preparation here for their riders. Also, Worst was suffering a bit in the second half of the race. But it doesn't need to be bad, because if you have a bit of decompression now, it means you can be good following Dendermonde, and that's when most of the races are. So overall, I think Van der Heijden can be happy with the top 10 place, but I do have to say she could still have ended outside of that top 10, because Seon del Carmen Alvarado was in that top 10 until she had a puncture after having a dramatic start. She was caught up behind Honsinger, starting a comeback from 25th to then end 14th despite having a flat tire. I think this does not really represent the level we've seen of Alvarado. Without, she could have potentially been around 8th where Sonnekant ended now.
I think overall today the North Americans were not really good. Disappointing, not really on the level they should have been, I guess. the question remains if that is because of the parkour or that's because of tomorrow, of Namur. And I hope it's because of Namur, and it's not because of how the circumstances were of the race, and that is just their form. And I don't really believe that's the case. I think for Honsinger, it was obviously not really her parkour, very fast, lost a lot of ground on the start yet again, and then it's very hard to be at the front. And I think she quickly realized, it was not going to be her day. For Rochette, it was I would say that she was looking quite fresh after the finish. I mean, it was not really her race as well. Not the finish she would have hoped for, I guess. But maybe it's all planned and so with tomorrow in mind, and we will see tomorrow. And like I said, I think Namur is gonna give us a bigger picture of what's going to happen in the next following races.
Definitely, I think we'll be in for an interesting race tomorrow. Also, Catablanca Vos is making her return to cyclocross. She skipped all the races after Tabor. And of course, she already has a World Cup win in Overijse. So I think we could be in for a cracker tomorrow. We made a preview podcast with Nathan Smith. He actually managed to get over. There's some very harsh travel restrictions for Brits who want to travel through France. And that's eventually how most people get here. So we managed to sort him out. So it's good to see that he is able to make it. In that preview, I really read over the name of Vos, but I think Vos is definitely somebody who can contend for the podium tomorrow. And as always, in Namur, you were looking at Brand, who has won, I think, 3 years in a row there. And you were also looking at Rochette, who has a good result there. Honsinger, so I think we could be in for an open race. What do you guys think? Do you have any favorites for that race?
I think that Brandt is on revenge, so I would think that she really wants to win tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to the return of Vos. I don't really expect her to be, she can surprise me to fight for victory, but I think that will just be maybe a bit too much. I think she will be close though towards a podium, and I'm very interesting to see what Rochette and Honsinger will do tomorrow. I think that both can be for Rochette. I don't really know. It's not, it's her parkour in a way, but also not. So I'm interesting to see how that will plan out. For Honsinger, I think this is really a parkour that suits her. A lot of climbing, so I hope that will come out, and that she will be able to ride to a top 5 or even a podium or maybe a win. Who knows?
Let's wait and see for that one until tomorrow. Racing in Namur continues. I'd like to thank you guys for being here today to talk about Rucphen.
Thanks for having me on.
No worries, thanks for hosting.
And we'll be back then tomorrow with a podcast about the World Cup in Namur. Hopefully 2 exciting races there once again today. Maybe not the most exciting parkour, but we had some good races. So hopefully tomorrow more of the same. Thanks everyone for listening, and I will see you guys again tomorrow. Goodbye.